Hello and welcome to the Photo Brigade podcast. I'm Robert Kaplan. I'm pumped to have my friend Ben Lowy on the podcast with me. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing good.
Well,
thanks for having me.
That's awesome. I just want to, before we get started and get into your career, I want to quickly thank Adorama and their event space for hosting these events. You can make sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, where we're going to be putting out all sorts of really cool content like this and other goodies to come. But I want to give you a quick introduction. I've made a little list of your accolades here, but Ben,
it's a short list.
It's all right list. Ben Lowy is a multi-award-winning photojournalist who has traveled the world covering conflicts starting in 2003 with the Iraq War. He's also covered Darfur, Afghanistan, Libya, as well as major stories including natural disasters worldwide. But it's not just doom and gloom, as he also covers sports, politics, and he shoots advertising and commercial work. His work has been published all over the place, including his own book,
Iraq Perspectives.
Available on Amazon. We'll put a little link below. He's been displayed in galleries. He's led the charge in changing the conversation about using mobile phones as a main camera in the early days of iPhonography.
Also, I am just a nice guy.
And he's a nice guy. Welcome, Ben Lowy.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know exactly, I can't remember exactly when we met, but I remember the first time I heard about you, and it's actually through my, maybe our mutual friend, Heather Charles, who was a student at Ohio University. She was a year above me at Viscom, and she went to, let's see here, I wrote this down. She went to a workshop, Diverse Voices Workshop.
No, it was Diverse Visions.
Visions Workshop.
AP Diverse Visions. It was in May of 2002 in Atlantic City. I remember this. I was the white guy.
You were the white guy.
Yeah, because like the whole point of Diverse Vision, it was dreamed up by Fred Sweets at AP. He's not there anymore, but it would have like a different photographer from every race, religion, creed would go and like work together and do different projects in Atlantic City. Mm-hmm. Well, that year was in Atlantic City, and I think it was very much supposed to be kind of like a Missouri Photo Workshop approach, but with different people.
Right.
And so I was, my wife actually went, I think, the year previous, and yeah, but Heather Charles and I were there together at the same time. And
so the reason, what brought you up was at that time, I think that soon after, it was my senior year of school, I think, or maybe it was my junior because her senior year, you were in Iraq, and there was something about, I believe it was when there was somebody threw a grenade into a U.S. area, and you were there covering it. And I'm sure we'll go through some of those photos while we're chatting here.
Yeah.
But that was your first time covering it, and you were pretty right out of school, right?
I was 23. I think I was the youngest photographer covering the war. And it was actually that event and my coverage of that grenade attack that sort of began my career.
Yeah.
Like the image that you have up right here is actually from Israel-Palestine. I think this is actually from Ramallah that I was covering when I was a student. So this is probably like summer of 2002. Scout Tu Fangshan, if you know.
Yeah, sure.
Like I think she was with me. She was outside this building. These kids were throwing Molotov cocktails at an Israeli tank. And after they threw it, I was like, it's probably a bad idea to be inside an abandoned building, right? So, and I left. But it was actually, I showed this image to Brian Storm, who was the president and in charge of Corbis at the time in 2002, late 2002, where I was like, they were looking for someone to go to Iraq, and they didn't have anyone to go because everyone wanted to go unilateral. And actually Shaul Schwartz was supposed to go to Iraq for Corbis, but last minute the Kuwaitis were like, oh, he has an Israeli passport, we can't let him in the country, sorry. So, and like Lindsay and Kate Brooks and a bunch of other photographers who were with Corbis at the time had already decided to go unilateral up from the north. So all of a sudden Corbis was stuck with like no one to go cover the Iraq War. And David Laidler, who just passed away a couple of months ago, was kind of in charge of the news division of Corbis. And I had gone into the office looking for an office job. I had no money left, and no one was giving me a photo job. I didn't know what to do. And he was like, do you want to go to Iraq? I was like, yes, I do.
And so, I mean,
it was this image that kind of...
This image is what...
Well, this image like, Brian Storm wanted to know. He thought, like, I had a decent sense of composition or photography, but he wanted to know that, like, I wouldn't die. Mm-hmm. And I explained to him the story that, like, oh, this happened, and I left the building, and then it got blown up after I left, and haha, I knew what I was doing.
Right.
He's like, okay.
He's like, okay, so this, I mean, you have to have your portfolio piece, right?
This was shot on film. This is the only picture in my portfolio that's shot on film.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Fuji Press 800, good old stuff.
So should I start going through this? I know you switched this up. So we're just
saying, like, this was the beginning. So then, I was on my way, and I was, went in with, the 101st Airborne. And this is that grenade attack.
Now this, I believe, made it on front pages of
the whole
everything, right?
Yeah.
And was that? Would you feel this was a turning point for you?
Well, there couldn't be a turning point because there was no point yet.
Like, there was no point yet.
I was unpublished. Like I happened to be in the right place in the right time. And actually, like James Noctway was supposed to be with the 101st Airborne, and last minute he decided to go unilateral as well, and it ended up being that I was the only freelance photographer who was there, and so I made that image and kind of propelled my career forward a little bit. And it's one of those things that I wrestled on a lot, is the idea that I started my career and I made a lot of a name for myself on the deaths of other people, and it's kind of still something that I deal with. And probably in Memorial Day, like 2008, I was walking around Arlington Cemetery with David Holloway, and I randomly stopped in front of a tombstone, and it was that actual man's grave. Which, it's weird how that happens. This was a vehicle I was riding in, and
oh my God,
in 2007, August 4th in 2007. But like, not all of Iraq is doom and gloom. Like, this image was actually really funny. I think there were a bunch of photographers who have photographed this scene, but this is Uday Hussein's sex palace in Adhamiyah, which is a very poor Shia section of Baghdad, and this Sunni guy came and built his sex palace there, where he would have crazy parties. And during shock and awe, there's a pool there, and it's so big that U.S. satellites were able to see it during the planning stage. And during shock and awe, they bombed the palace, but they left the pool because there was this plan that you would have a relaxation spot at one point when they took over, and so every weekend, different units of, like, whether it was American, British, or Australian army forces or armed forces would kind of go in and have a pool party.
Right.
Now, of course, because of General Order Number 1, there's no alcohol in a Muslim country. There's, they were lacking a fundamental ingredient to a pool party. So someone had a really smart idea. Like, all the soldiers were getting O'Doul's sent to them from back home.
Really?
Yeah, because O'Doul's doesn't have alcohol, so it passed muster. But one of the Army Corps engineer guys had this great idea. He's like, well, if you build a 30-foot tall beer bong, you could probably take a case of O'Doul's in like a minute. If you could, you will get drunk. Maybe.
That's true.
So they would try their hearts out to do that, and then go diving, and then vomit profusely into the pool. It was a lot.
Well, that's interesting that they actually left the pool for. I mean, you wouldn't think that that's something they would consider in a bombing raid, right?
Right. I mean, there's some weird stuff. I mean, I came across a lot of weird stuff when I was in Iraq. Like, two of Qusay's, I think they were lions that they left in a cage that they used to feed people to, and they actually brought in someone from the San Diego Zoo to train these off the taste of human flesh, because these two lionesses were used to, because they had been fed people over the years, and so in the middle of, like, the green zone, there were these two lions that were used to eating people, and you had this guy from the zoo in San Diego trying to, like, train them off.
That's insane.
But I probably show this image a lot, the one that's up right now, when I talk to students, as probably the more real reason why behind what I do. And it's not for, like, the super action, but this is. It's a shame because it doesn't exist as it used to anymore. But this is a meeting between Sunni and Shia sheikhs that effectively ended the Sunni uprising in 2007, and sort of started bringing in the Sunni awakening and sort of the peace that held on in Iraq until ISIS came to the forefront. And I was the only American photographer. I was the only photographer there, and there's only one other writer there. And it was like being able to be on the front lines of history for something like that. Like this was this meeting where like peace was actually happening. Like that.
Did you feel like it was you knew that was what was happening?
Like and like sitting there, you're like, wow, I'm in this like remarkable moment.
Yeah.
Of something actually happening.
Right.
I remember studying about like, how World War I started or how World War II, these small little events, that propelled the world forward. And like those are the things that end up in history books that we study when we're in school, and that's kind of important to me.
So that was some of your Iraq work. So wait, there's film here.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So
Take me through this project a little bit.
So there was this image that came out of Iraq, which I took by accident, sort of. I'm driving to a party. I'm actually with Lindsay Adara in a car. She had a lens I never used before. I borrowed it. I leaned out. I took a picture.
Uh-huh.
And what I learned about that image is that people didn't know what was going on. And before they read the caption, they wanted to be sucked into the image. And there was a certain aesthetic going on that people made assumptions.
Uh-huh.
Like, there's nothing nefarious about this image. It's a man actually jumping off a lamppost on a bridge into the Tigris River to go swimming because it's 125 degrees.
Yeah, it totally doesn't look like that.
But because we have a history of lynching photography in this country, because it's like from a war, people make assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
But that little hook, that aesthetic hook that grabs people, brings them into the image. And then they were like, oh, I'll read the caption. I'll find out what's going on. And that really led me down a different road for my photography, starting right there. And I'm lucky that happened in the beginning of my career. And I really wanted to play with, trying to create images that would suck people in with the aesthetics.
So we actually already have a question from the audience.
Is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey,
Yeah.
how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
So the guy jumping, that's full frame?
Oh yeah, this was shot with a Nikon D1X, which I think was a 4.5 megapixel camera with a 14 millimeter lens.
What is your feeling on or general habit of cropping after the fact? Are you a committed full frame guy, or you go back?
Let's repeat the question because I'm not sure if that's.
So the question was about cropping, like if I'm committed to cropping or if I'm like a staunch full frame person. I like seeing the image as I shot it. If I do crop, I mean, there are definitely cases where I do crop, specifically when I'm shooting sports or it is extraneous information, like another, just stuff I don't need in the image. If I do crop, I do it in the ratio of the image that I shot it. But to me, cropping is indicative of like taking something out of the image. So like if we're not allowed to use a clone stamp to remove an annoying soda can that's fallen into our picture, we shouldn't be allowed to crop it out.
Can't do that? Oh.
Yeah. I mean, I think ethically we're allowed to crop, but I think that was because the ethics of cropping came long before Photoshop. I mean, we can get into a whole ethical conversation, but it's like, why are we allowed to use Flash? Because I can't why can we create our own sun in photojournalism and bring a sun with us?
That's true.
But
So did the thought ever? I don't want to belabor the point about the crop, but it just like it popped in my head right when I saw the picture. Did the thought ever cross your mind to crop out the lamppost to make that picture as nebulous as possible?
No, because I actually like the lamppost because it adds some information to it. But I'll tell you what, like I definitely came across scenes where, we know when we're in the field that there can be some really gruesome stuff. Like if I'm at a scene of a suicide bombing or a car bomb, like there are body parts all over the place and there are people screaming. But some things are unpublishable in America. So do you photograph something which just have a picture of a man screaming, but you kind of, when you compose the image, you don't include like, oh, he's missing several limbs, because that's not publishable. Or do you do it, and then later on that image gets cropped by a newspaper editor because you can't put such gruesome things in a magazine or in a newspaper. But that can fundamentally change, because if you have someone screaming out in ecstasy of happiness versus in pain, the look on their face in a camera might actually be the same. And so you can go through this, there is potential for a man reaching out to pick up his child that he hasn't seen in a while, and he has this like, look on his face, or then a man who has no arms. But if you cut that off, you're cutting off kind of a lot of information. So, yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That's a good question. Thank you.
I mean, I don't know if you want me to go, like, it was okay to go off topic like that.
No. If anyone has questions,
Totally not
DM.
okay. I'm pissed off. I'm leaving. No.
So,
So making that blue image kind of forced me and made me think a little bit. And I went to art school, and I originally wanted to be a comic book artist, and there's a whole bunch of other things there. So like I was basically experimenting. A lot of my career is about, okay, I'm doing this stuff as a photojournalist, but how could I do it better in a different way? Because I think what I was frustrated with was, during the Iraq War, the baseball season started.
Uh-oh.
And everyone went on living like nothing was happening. In World War II, they stopped baseball.
Right.
And with the Iraq War, it was like shit was still going on.
Yeah.
Like, and people would ask me, use my satellite dish to check the score and of games, and it really. It threw me for a while. My transit, like everyone has their own kind of way of transitioning back into like society when they come back from a war zone. I used to sit on the stairs of Union Square and just watch people live their life. Sometimes most people are completely oblivious to what goes on in the rest of the world. And I would just sit there and watch New Yorkers be New Yorkers and kind of find my way back home again. Mm-hmm. It's tough sometimes, and so for me, I wanted to figure out a way to connect with some of those people in a more unique way than just having the same images of another bombing or another person in a hospital attack, another dead soldier. Because I think if you didn't know them, because of the information age and how many pictures we see these days, it all starts mingling together. So, I started with this technique. Was my first one. I took a Holga
panorama.
Yeah, and I sort of measured how many shots I could fit onto one roll. And I said, what if I can make one roll of film into one picture? Mm-hmm. And I wanted to call it a thematic panoramic. So it wasn't a true panoramic. It's about an idea. So this was an image taken over the course of 8 hours while on patrol with an Iraqi army unit. And I wanted to make a portrait of every soldier in the unit on one type of, one thing of film. Or like this is an entire roll of film. It took me 3 weeks to make this image. It is the entire, to me, story of the Haitian earthquake. From the beginning, the despair, digging through the rubble, looting, and the Sean Penn's refugee camp. And like these are broken up. And so I used to have like a little Post-it note that I would tape to the back of each Holga, and I'd write an outline of what I wanted to capture on this one roll of film and see if I could do it. The problem with this is that, printed 24 inches tall, it was 20 feet long.
Right, yeah.
And it took, Ed Cashy printed them on his printer in his office. It took 18 hours to rip it out. Yeah, so it was like, okay,
and
that's
errored at
that's
like
not
90%.
That's not really publishable. So I was trying to, for me, it's always about trying to figure out how can I do it. And this became a book, and it became this huge project for me.
So this is another thing. I want to, we're talking about your book now a little bit, and the business of photography as well. So as we go through these photos, can you also talk about the business side of things? Like, was this a way to supplement, the cost of going to these places? I was on assignment a lot in Iraq, quite a bit. I think there were only 2 or 3 times where I went on my own dime and picked up assignments while I was there. But most of the time I was on long assignments from whether it was Time or the New York Times Magazine were my major clients. And but I always had the kind of straightforward photo J work that I would do. And it's kind of a funny story how this project started, but it has a lot to do with my mom. Actually. Yeah.
So Airport Road that leads from the airport in Baghdad into Baghdad was for a long time considered the most dangerous road in the world, and you had to get in these armored buses called rhinos to take you to your hotel. And I would have, my camera bag and my computer in with me, but like my clothes would be in a backpack hanging outside because it wasn't that important. And we came under indirect fire, and the bag with my clothes got blown off or fell off. Like I had no pants.
Oh no.
And for some reason I called my mother rather than my wife, or she was my girlfriend at the time. She wasn't my wife yet, but I was like, I lost my pants.
I lost my pants.
And can you go to the Gap and get me, 1969 bootcut jeans, and can you FedEx them to Baghdad because FedEx worked. And my mom was like, Ben, why can't you go to the mall?
Oh.
And I was like, Mom, there's no mall here. I mean, there are 2 escalators in this entire country, and they don't work. And she's like, well, I don't know that because all I ever see you photograph is a bombing, is an operation, is the normal photo J work. I don't know what it looks like on the street. Well, I was like, well, Mom, because I'm this 6-foot tall, bald white guy. I look exactly like a soldier. I can't go walking on the street. Like, it's too dangerous.
Right, yeah.
So it's like, you know what? Next time I go in an armored car and I'm driving down the road, I will photograph out the window.
Really?
And I will show you what Baghdad looks like. And so this became like a ginormous, 6-year project, basically, of me photographing out of every car window that I went on.
Mm-hmm. And it's perfect little frame also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool.
And and like when I was doing my artist statement for the book, like there are these metaphors. It's us versus them. There's a barrier, like a barrier of communication, and East versus West, and Islam and America, and it looks like a TV. These are all things I thought about after the fact.
Right.
When I was really shooting it, when I began shooting it, it was like to show my mom what it looked like.
Which is very different than, where's she from? Here? New York?
Yeah.
Yes, very different.
Right.
All right. So when you were, doing this project, how many photographs did you take? I imagine you had all the time in the world because there's just a lot of waiting, a lot of driving around, a lot of nothing, right?
I mean, I think, of the raws that we edited through, there were about 4,000 that we went through that had been edited over the years. But I probably shot a lot more than that.
Right.
From just sitting in a car.
And did you edit them yourself? I mean, when you were covering the war, you were...
I was doing this for me. So there was a large portion of time where I wouldn't visit these for like a year because I'd be on assignment, I'd be on a deadline. Because I would do these like this one was shot on the way to photograph a prison inside that building. And I was shooting the prison and to see if prisoners were being tortured for the New York Times. So I was just shooting that on the way to this prison assignment in Baghdad. And so, I'd come back and I'd dump the cards, and I'm working on a deadline for the New York Times, so I'd put the shots that I made for the New York Times in a folder, and then I'd say, oh, this is my Windows project, and like maybe I'd come back to it, but maybe I wouldn't.
Did you, in the back of your mind, think it might be a book project?
Yeah, it was crystallizing. It was definitely crystallizing, as I wanted... If I was going to do a book, it's weird. My relationship with books is weird. Like, I learned photography by looking at photo books. I learned photography by sitting at that Union Square Barnes & Nobles, and the one that used to be on 20th.
Totally know what you're talking about.
I sat there for years, and I looked through photo books. That's how I learned. But I wanted, if I ever did a photo book, for it to actually do something, whether for the actual art of photography itself or for what I was trying to say. I wanted it to mean something. I didn't want to put out a photo book just to put out a photo book.
Is there a book you were looking through that kicked your butt like none other?
Yeah. What inspired you in particular? Anyone's work?
There are a lot of books that really influenced me. I mean, obviously, like in terms of learning how to compose and think about color, Alex Webb and Harvey were big influences on my work. David Allen Harvey.
Oh, yeah.
But I would honestly say that the one work which really moved me more than anything else was how beautiful every single image is in was Joachim Leydenfog's Albanians, which is a black and white book, and I don't even shoot black and white, but I that book was amazing to me. one of Alex Webb's very early books about when he went to go, not Alex Webb, excuse me, why am I totally blanking on the name?
Someone's book.
Alex Soth's, sorry.
Okay.
Early books when he went to go adopt his son in South America, which was all just, in a way, pictures of dogs and glass that had been mounted on people's gates in the cement.
Right.
It's kind of a survey that the idea of trying to visualize and talk about one thing while visualizing something else was also a really big education for me. Using sort of documentary and one way of seeing a thing, a noun, and then having it represent something else entirely. That was really important to how I started thinking about photography and my photography. This became the second chapter of that book, which is, again, a way like how do I talk about, what the Windows talked about one thing, and then Night Vision talked about another, and I had the opportunity to go with a lot of sniper teams into the field, and I would connect the night vision goggle to my camera. But then, having a bunch of images that were also like this, it wasn't just about the photojournalism, it was also about the technology. And that was something I actually, with the iPhone, came back to, this idea that technology can change the way we see the world. Whereas here, Iraq at night was only seen by the American forces or by the military. It wasn't seen by Iraqis, what their country looked like at night. And I thought that was really interesting, where the technology changes the documentary and changes the experience.
So one of the things. Oh,
did you?
Sorry, sorry, I didn't see that.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah, I have a quick answer.
For your Windows project,
Yeah.
when I was in Iraq in 2005, I spent about 70% of the time on the road,
Yeah.
and that's the perspective that I got most of the time.
Right.
And you get the sense of how vigilant you have to be because how dangerous it is. Did you feel that with the people with the soldiers that you were embedded with?
Yeah, it was interesting.
The question was about the danger. You felt.
The danger, yeah. I mean, I had been injured a few times, so I was obviously aware, but in a very different way, because I'm sitting in the back, usually behind the driver, sometimes on the passenger side. I don't see what's in front of me. I'm only staring outside that window. And my placement there actually displaced whoever was sitting there and put them in the gunner position. So, my ability to say, we shouldn't go down there or this road, was often not there. And to be honest, I think the minute you lift a camera up to your face, you're turning off a little bit of that little voice inside your head that's saying, "Oh shit!" Because I'm thinking about light, I'm thinking about my shutter, I'm thinking about my aperture, and I'm not thinking about me. I'm thinking about the image. And I think that's how people work. I mean, if you were so stymied by fear, you wouldn't be able to make images. And so that camera works as a mental shield and a mental block in many ways. So as I'm shooting, I was probably only thinking about the image. The worst bombing I was in on August 4th of 2007, we had 10-car convoy left at 4 in the morning in Arab Jabor, which is about 20 kilometers south of Baghdad, and only 5 came back by 4. And about 12 me and 11 other soldiers crowded into one Humvee to get out. That was the only room that was left. And I remember being squished right behind the driver. And as we're driving out of there, I'm thinking in my head that I have no control whether I live or die, because he's just driving. He's like, we don't know if they're IEDs. The whole area had been planted with IEDs, and if he went this way, it wasn't up to me. I realized that my life was totally out of my hands at that point, and I started thinking about something else entirely, because I couldn't. There's nothing I could do. If we went over a bomb, I was like, whatever. So.
That's how. When I was there in 2005, I was in Crete, and it was kind of crazy. There was roadside bombs everywhere.
Right.
So you get to the point where that's.
Yeah. This is RPG Alley,
yes.
into Crete.
Yeah.
So this is I was with the sniper team all night while they watched for people looking for people planting bombs on RPG Alley.
I
Yeah.
was in Liberty, which is right in.
Okay.
Right in the downtown area.
Is that where like Saddam's former palace was, where they had the mural by the workout room?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was in Liberty and I was in Crete, which is.
Were you in 4th ID or?
I was in 05. The 4th ID left.
Okay.
No, actually, I was with the 4th ID, but I was in the guard unit.
Okay.
It
Okay.
was the 42nd discount
Okay.
out of New York that controlled the 4th ID.
Okay.
At the time. But I guess it was almost the same way. After a while,
It just.
you're not even thinking about the what's coming because you're gonna lose your mind.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do your job if you're, always
Worrying, freaking
worrying.
out.
Yeah.
I kind of
gotta let go a little bit.
I can't imagine what it would be like to be in your position, obviously, as a soldier and also in this kind of danger. But I kind of feel the same way when I'm on a sketchy flight or something. And I've been on a couple like private ones. I went to Haiti on a little thing. I'm just like, what am I gonna do? It's like
you
just
gotta let
just
go.
trust that it's gonna be okay because there's nothing I can do about it. So we're continuing through this.
I'll breeze through these.
So talk to me a little bit about, what did your family say, or how does your family feel about you going and covering this type of conflict and risking your life? And has it changed? I remember when we did this Wii swap.
Yeah, the Wii and the Xbox.
You were just having your kid, and you're like, I'm chilling out now. I'm gonna.
Well, it's funny. Like I so badly, I didn't want to be a photographer. I wanted to be a war photographer. Like that was the only thing I wanted to do. That's what inspired me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now that I've had kids, I've sort of learned that there's more. I guess it's almost cliche that like, but there's more to it than just that. And I remember. I won't say his name, but when I was in Libya right before Tim Hetherington was killed, we were sitting at a cafe in our hotel, me and Tim Hetherington and another photographer, and he knew that my wife was actually pregnant with our second kid when I was in Libya, and he looked over at me and said, "Did you ever see my pictures from the Balkans?" I was like, no, I can't say that I ever have. He's like, because my daughter was a toddler.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't go to that one.
Oh yeah.
And I really I took it to heart what he said to me, and I've really been thinking about it. And I did Libya a few times, and I've been back to Afghanistan, and then luckily in a way it almost came at the same time that the slowdown in the industry came, and people were trying to remake themselves, and there weren't that many assignments going back to war zones. So I kind of, it's not to say I won't one day go back or that I'm actively saying I wouldn't do it, though I do think there are a lot of editors who know my wife, who know my kids, and are just like, yeah, we're not going to send him to
right,
Yucapanistan,
right,
which is my catch-all.
Do you
Yucapanistan?
Yucapanistan.
Yeah.
That's funny. Now, I guess you were talking about Tim. There's Hondros. These guys were killed. Doing what you did or do.
Right.
Does that put things in perspective for you at all? Change your mind about how you want to cover things, the safety now compared to maybe when you started?
Yeah, I think Hondros and Hetherington and Michael Brown, who's injured on that attack,
Michael.
is my son's godfather.
Oh, I didn't know that. Michael and I went to school together.
Okay, yeah. So he's my younger son's godfather, and actually, when he came back from Libya, my wife went into labor an hour after Tim Hetherington's memorial service. She couldn't even fit into the pew at the church, and Michael came to the hospital, and we both documented my son's birth with the same iPhones we used to photograph the Libyan war.
Right.
Which was,
Which is something I want to get into, the whole iPhonography.
But I will say because of, I think ever since Daniel Pearl, journalists have been targeted.
Yeah.
More than ever before. I think Tim and Chris weren't necessarily targeted. That was like a mortar that just came down that killed them because they happened to be there. But yeah, we journalists in the field are getting targeted more than ever before. People are aware of the power of media and of pictures and of social media platforms than they ever were before. It's dangerous.
And you also have the kidnappings. You were talking about Lindsay earlier, Tyler.
Yeah, and you know what, if you're kidnapped and you don't have an organization behind you, or if you don't have insurance, like what do you do?
Just gotta hope like hell your family fights for you, I guess.
Yeah, look, Austin Tice is still, as far as we all know, it's been 4 years. He's still a prisoner in Syria. So, I mean, it's a serious thing, and as the father of 2 young boys, I don't want to leave them without a father figure.
Yeah. So
for me, it's really thinking about the danger element. And I know when I went back to Libya after my second son was born, I really wanted closure, because what happened to Tim and what happened to Chris, and they had both emailed me the night before they were killed, and Tim had actually asked me, he said, can you go to Adorama and buy me, I don't know if it was Adorama or B&H, but buy me 220 film. He was out of 220 film because he was shooting with like a Mamiya 6 or Mamiya 7, and I needed, and so it was part of a big reason why I went back, and I did almost lose my marriage over a photograph where a man was shot in front of me, and I incidentally captured the instant of this man's death, like his head blowing apart, and it was right when Tripoli was falling to the rebel forces, and that's a rare image. It's a rare image to capture like a bullet actually entering someone's head, like right at that
like
moment,
Eddie Adams style.
Yeah, and it was, and I sat on it for weeks. Because like that's not the assignment I was on. It's too gratuitous. It's like too much, and I knew it wasn't what I was there for. And at one point, I got an assignment to leave Libya and go to Afghanistan, and it was like middle of the night. And I was like, I should publish this image. It's a rare image. So I put it on the web, on Getty, and my wife gets Google alerts to when my images appear up. And she saw that image, and she called me on my New York cell phone while I was in Afghanistan. And she was like, I'm leaving you because you cheated on me with war. Like, you promised me you wouldn't do anything crazy after, Tim and Chris died, and here you are. And it took like a $4,000 2-hour conversation with her, AT&T, thank you for that one. But,
And Getty just moved that picture. They didn't call you to discuss it. They just put it up on the wire and boom.
Well, they didn't put it up in the wire because I'm not represented by the wire. I'm in reportage, but it is part of my package, and I had a full caption and everything like that. And my agent had known what I photographed, but it was more that my wife saw that image and felt that it had violated a promise that I made to her about staying safe. So, and it took a long conversation before she finally relented, and obviously I'm still married and she didn't leave me.
I understand that point about your wife, but I guess what I was asking, regardless of whether we're talking about Getty the agency or Getty the wire, that they posted that, the agency posted that, or it was kept internal, or how did she see it?
She gets, I don't know if anyone see it, but she got updates to when my images appeared.
Google alerts, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was like an internal Google alert or she was able to look through it, but
she
found it. She saw it.
Ben, thankfully you're still with your wife, but how do you feel about what she suggested?
How do you feel about that, Ben?
That I cheated on her with war? Sometimes you get drawn into the situation, and I think I've always, in order to mentally survive, had the Ben I am when I'm over there and the Ben I am when I'm back home. And, sometimes you turn off thinking about stuff that's going on back home so you can document what you see in front of you and keep, yourself from having a midlife crisis. I think I was there and there was a war happening in front of me. And as much as one of the promises I made her, I said, look, Joachim Leidenfog, when he did the Albanians book, he doesn't have a single picture of violence in the entire book because he didn't like getting into those situations. And I said, look, Marvy, I can go and I can photograph the fall of Tripoli and this rebirth of this country, Libya, like that, without photographing violence. Like, that was my promise, and that's why she let me go. And, but then once you were there and, your colleagues are out in front of you, and you're swept along by this your adrenaline and by your ego. I would say, at least for me, you kind of like, holy shit, these, this is getting real. Like, I have never been, in all my years in Afghanistan or Iraq, in more intense gunfire battles than I was in Libya. I mean, it was full on. I've never seen, and I think the closest I would say to it is what I would imagine Vietnam was like. It was insane, and you get swept into it, and you want to document it because you're there, because that's why you picked up a camera in the first place. And I forgot about the promise I made to my wife. But she has never let me forget, and that's why I never played with the Xbox ever again.
Well, I mean, it's important to know that, your limitations, and also that you are lucky, like
Right.
something could have happened to you, and which would have resulted in
Right.
who knows what.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay.
I mean, so basically, after that and during that, I again, and going back to that image of the blue man, I was really trying to find a different way to do photojournalism and to talk about things in a different way, because I wanted to keep my marriage, I wanted to be a father, and I still wanted to be a photojournalist. So this is from these are images that I made from the sinking of the Deepwater Horizon,
Right.
and the oil spill in the
Little
Gulf of
change of
Mexico.
pace here, yeah.
Yeah. So I had an assignment to go down there, and basically what I did, everyone was trying to find like the one turtle or the one bird that got covered in oil, or the very sad, shrimping boat captain who wasn't allowed to go out. And I was like, how can I talk about this differently? How can I make a beautiful image out of something horrible? Because that ultimately is the power of photography. And I say this, and I preface this, that I say this as a joke. But let's say it's the winter, and you're walking your dog, and your dog just defecates. And there's like some amazing smoke coming off of it. And if you have the right angle, with the light coming down, you have this big pile of dog poop, you can make a beautiful image. Only with photography. Like, you're not going to sit there, a watercolor painter is not going to sit there and paint a picture of dog poop. And some sculptor is not going to make a bronze cast of, like, dog poop. I mean, maybe Damien Hirst would. But, photography has this amazing potential to make something really beautiful out of something horrible. And, it was done. Weston did it with the Rod and Peppers. Irving Penn had did it. And so I was like, what if I could make something really beautiful out of something horrible like the oil spill? So what I did was I sacrificed my leg hair because they wouldn't let me back into port with oil on my legs. And I would jump into the water because most of the Gulf is not so deep. And I would just shoot straight down into the oil spill as it washed in. And I would make these kind of abstracted images.
Okay, so this photo is taken from,
like,
standing up in the water.
I'm standing up in the
Oh my
water.
gosh. I thought these were aerials.
No, these are. I am in.
This is a pizza.
This is my pepperoni pizza shot. That's actually what I call it, and you can imagine what I probably title this one.
Oh wow.
I won't. I know we're live, so I'm not. And my kids are watching, so. But yeah, I mean, all these are shot with a 24-70, of me standing there, in the water, my pants rolled up, and
Not those pants your mother bought you.
not the pants my mother bought me. Yeah, those are too tight. Yeah.
Nowadays,
She
right?
didn't. Nowadays.
Yeah.
She didn't know my size, but but this was a successful project for me because I achieved my goal, which was trying to create a different aesthetic that would make people want to look at the caption.
Yeah.
They would say, what am I looking at? And just by doing that, by getting people to ask, you get them involved. You get your audience involved in the story. And that was missing for me in journalism. Because, who reads a newspaper anymore? Like, when you go on the subway, like, do you see actually people reading a newspaper? No, people just, like, they'll look at some information on their phone where the pictures are, like, this big. Or they just see what it is on Twitter. And people just pass over information. If it doesn't directly affect them, or if they don't want that information, they don't even know what's going on in the world. And that's the whole point of what we do, is to shine a light on whatever we see. And so for me, this was successful because I was able to do that with a project like this, and I wasn't breaking any marital war zone rules.
Well,
Yeah. Though this was in 2010, so it was a little bit before
oh, right.
the rules were in place.
So, okay, perfect.
Yeah,
I was going to
okay,
say,
so
I
now-
want to talk
yeah.
about your iPhonography. This is exciting to me because it's so weird. Having been I was telling you, on the Bieber tour, I got into the world of social and
Right.
iPhone photography in a weird way there. And then to see you and a few others going to war zones and shooting real news with your iPhones, it was funny because it came under fire by so many people. This is not real journalism.
I actually got hate mail. I received hate mail from people because I dared to use my iPhone for journalism. So this started here. I actually started in this store in many ways. I had an assignment for a client that shall not be named.
Uh-huh.
And they asked me to go to Uravan, which is in southwest Colorado. It's where about 15% of the yellow cake for the Manhattan Project came from.
Okay.
And the U.S. Department of Energy has already buried this city under concrete because it's just radioactive. And they wanted to do a story on it. And they said, Ben, it's southwest Colorado. It's like big sky country. It's beautiful. Can you shoot with an X-Pan, a Hasselblad X-Pan? So I actually came here to rent one. And they were like, can you shoot slide film and like Provia and Velva? Just make it just amazing. And I was like, sure. But in the back of my head, I'm like, I don't even remember how to shoot chrome. Do you underexpose chrome or do you overexpose it? I was like, it's been years. And a friend of mine, is it under? A friend of mine was like, Ben, this new application just came out for the iPhone. It makes it look like you shot pictures in 1965. No one will know. This is like the iPhone 1, which took, on Thematic, it took one picture every 30 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
And I went out there. I had the X-Pan with the chrome film. I had my Canon 5D because I just wasn't sure if I was going to mess this up or not.
Right.
And I had my iPhone. And I made these images. And so this is all from this radioactive. I probably have a third testicle at this point, just from walking in all these radioactive. This is a town. It's going to be bulldozered over.
Mm-hmm.
This is a woman who's said she's not leaving and she's staying there. This is actually a piece of yellow cake that she was using as a rock in her garden.
Uh-huh.
Obviously it's not been turned into, uranium.
Nuclear,
yet.
yeah. Right.
And this is like where they've started burying it. And actually, this is the ground. You can see it from outer space.
Wow. So when you were shooting this, you were shooting in basically three different mediums.
Right. So and they wanted me to shoot video. So I had the 5D on a tripod, and I'm shooting video.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm also just checking my exposure. I'm making the shot with the chrome film on the X-Pan, and then I'm like taking out my iPhone and making a shot. And when I came back to New York, I sent the film in to be processed in a lab, and I went home and I had my little Epson 2880 or whatever, and I made little 8x10 prints of all these iPhone pictures, and I brought them into the office, because the film hadn't come out yet, and they didn't know that. They're like, these are amazing. we love these. What did you use to shoot this with? And I was like, my phone. we should go out for lunch. I would just change the subject, and they're like, really, what camera did you use to shoot these with? I was like, my iPhone. They're like, we can't run that. That's not a real camera. That's not a real picture. And it ran online, but in the fortunately, my abilities with Chrome turned out okay, and those pictures ran in the magazine. But that started my thinking process about using the iPhone, because they were interested in the shots because they look different. And here I am picking up a new piece of technology, and I guess most of our careers, you and I both, we're children of this digital age.
Right.
It's like we didn't shoot film or in college we spent time in the darkroom.
I was the first student to go digital.
Okay.
At OU.
All right. So, I remember Kodak brought in one of those VGA $30,000 ginormous, the Kodak Nikon.
Right.
And we would play around with it. But yeah, so that kind of led me down this road of trying to, what could I do with the iPhone? How could it be different? How could it be start? And so one of the things that I started with was in Afghanistan.
Uh-huh.
Now, my experience in Afghanistan was pretty cool. After like 6 years in Iraq of doing just embeds and being under fire, I decided that my experience in Afghanistan, I was just going to do it from the civilian side. And I spent a lot of time walking around Afghanistan on my own. And, I am a 6 foot tall, bald white guy. It's kind of hard to be subtle about my presence,
Right.
And so I started shedding camera gear. Like I'd have the donkey bag and the think tank pouches and like 4 cameras and like all my lenses. I'd be walking around. They'd be like, "There's that guy walking around. He's gonna take a picture. Let's pose for him."
Right.
And then as my time in Afghanistan progressed, I would start getting less and less. And if I spent so much time there, I'd actually go to the grocery store, to buy food, and then I wouldn't take my cameras with me, so I just have my phone. And so it became sort of this. I was like, all of a sudden, this is just my funny menu picture.
Right. Yeah. Did you try it? Was it good?
The cock?
Did you try the
great.
Afghan cock? Yeah, right.
Yeah. but I started finding that I was able.
And 2 no less, not just 1 minute. There's 2
The family meal was like 1.5 liters. Yeah, of cock. It was so yummy. But like I just found like I was starting to get different types of images walking around, and people treated me in a different way. I started bleeding into the background.
Yeah.
And making images that would have been hard to make on the street with my traditional camera, with me being, as big as I am. Like, I think one of the things that is often misunderstood is that the photographer's actual presence adds or subtracts to the image making process. So if you look at someone like Alex Webb, who I've never seen wear a different color than black or charcoal, and he's, a little man that kind of just runs through a scene, but he's, and I'm not. And so like people's reaction to me is very
Right.
different. So like your physical appearance as a photographer also changes people's reaction to you before and after you make an image. And so for me, using the iPhone really helped. This is my gun and my cat picture. I think my gun and cat picture. The only cat picture I have
the phone.
on the phone. I
Instagram,
went
yeah,
on
sure.
Instagram. Yeah.
that probably has the most likes of them all, right?
Yeah. It was early on. And an image like this is where I first started seeing like really great interaction and the promise of social media. This is actually the Western supermarket in Kabul, and I actually went to go get a box of Captain Crunch. I had been in Afghanistan for 3 months, and I just had a hankering for some Captain Crunch. And I would have loved to have been in this meeting where the owners of this Western supermarket in Kabul were like, "We need to get more people to go shopping here. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to print a giant face of a woman.
A woman.
And you're going to have to walk into her mouth to go shopping. It's perfect." And so I posted this image, and I had done a big story on the drug trade and it basically embedded with the Taliban, or drug dealers who were Taliban for convenience sake. And they were, weirdly, some of them were my Facebook friends. And they're on the restricted
So
list.
you're probably flagged.
Yeah, many times. And then, I also, went to art school. So I had a lot of art school friends who were really big fans of Cindy Sherman and Sandy Scoglin, and were quite feminist about their approach to the interpretation of the female form in media. And so I posted this is before Instagram came out, I posted this on my Tumblr blog, and all of a sudden, I get these messages where it's like, "This is wrong, you're objectifying the female form, it's just," and then, I get like, "This is haram, we're going to bomb you."
Oh, gosh.
And all of a sudden, I felt like Dana Carvey from Saturday Night Live, where I'm like, I'm bringing people together.
Right.
I got like the Taliban and feminists commenting on this
Right.
one photo on Tumblr. And but actually, they got so many threats in that one day that was up that they actually did have to take that down the next day. Yeah, not from my blog.
Right.
Yeah. So that got me really interested in social media and its potential. I don't know if Cartier-Bresson would be
I was gonna say, that looks
rolling
very-
over in his grave right now. But it was funny that as I started doing this, I did start racking up the emails about how could I be shooting photojournalism with an iPhone.
Right.
But it took this image, and so I was on assignment for Kathy Ryan at the New York Times Magazine, and to do a story on like Afghans at leisure playing sports. Like they have a great wrestling tradition in Afghanistan. Lots of boating. like small bird shooting, like just like how Afghans, after all these years of war, how they relax. And I did the story with my traditional, my Canon cameras, but then I also shot it with my iPhone. And when I came into the office to show it to her, she liked it so much that she decided to run these for 12 pages in the magazine.
Yeah.
And she wrote an op-ed at the beginning of the magazine, basically defending the use of iPhone photography, about how it's just another tool in the photographer's bag. And I think it was after she wrote that, and this appeared so bigly.
Bigly, I like
so
that.
bigly.
Yeah.
I'm now creating words. You've misunderestimated me. But it appeared so largely in the magazine that it really started bringing.
Still not right. Yeah, but that's okay. It was large.
It's
in the magazine.
been a long day, and I don't want to drink any water because you filled my cup. My cup is going to run over. Yeah.
You need a cup that's more bigly.
Bigly, yes, I do. That's my next tattoo. So that I was like, I'm invested in it. And so when I started with Libya, the idea of using the iPhone was not, to me, it's past the nuance of it being just doing it for the sake of being an iPhone, or against photojournalism, or to keep on getting that hate mail. For me, it was using social media, and I received grants from Slate and from Tumblr. Thematic also actually gave me some funds so I could go, because I wasn't pulling down assignments to go to Libya. But to me, it was also, and it goes back to that Blue Man image, is like the idea that I was using the iPhone as a new technology was something that sold the body of work to the people who were looking at it. It wasn't just that I was doing it differently. So, this was an image that I shot with my Canon, and this was the same thing that I shot with my iPhone. It wasn't that I was doing anything differently. My composition and the ability to see hadn't changed, and the story hadn't changed. But what was selling the project was that I was shooting it with my iPhone. And it was where I was like using the technology as a marketing point for the body of work.
Mm-hmm. And so you were mentioning the previous stories that we were looking at when you started using your iPhone. Those were actually, you were shooting iPhone for print for the most part, yeah?
Well,
I mean, not for the social immediacy.
Right, I was
thing.
shooting it for me more than anything else. But like here, like I was on assignment for GQ, and but I knew I also wanted to, I knew that GQ, like a Condé Nast publication, they were going to print like 4 months later. And so the immediacy of covering a war, that news wouldn't get out. So I was like, well, what if I seed my Instagram account or my Tumblr account with the images I'm shooting and use that as a marketing campaign for my actual client?
Right.
And that was a new concept. Like
Right.
no one had been doing that.
Right.
And I really, it was at that time when J.J. Abrams came out with the Cloverfield movie, which was not a very good movie. I'm sorry, J.J.
Sorry, JJ.
Yeah. But the marketing campaign for that movie was phenomenal. I mean, he used social media and fake Wikipedia pages and just fake websites. I mean, to create this buzz for a movie that was kind of mediocre.
Right.
But it made that movie, and so I was thinking like, oh, I can do that now with social media for photojournalism.
Right. So a lot of, you and I both, we've talked about it before, but there are some people that get on your case about
Not
this
anymore.
Well, not
but
so much anymore.
They used to.
They used to. Well, then it was about just, how
Then it
dare
was
you.
like, oh, you have a filter on.
It used to be about the tool, then the filter, and that kind of thing.
know.
And then, but now I think that some people, I don't know, maybe it's not that current, but I mean, people might say, for instance, like because you're using it as a marketing tool as well as photojournalism, that somehow there's some sort of ethical boundary there. How do you feel about that?
People who write ethical things are not in the field working. I'm sorry, but like I think Eugene Smith said it best when he said, "I didn't create these rules. Why should I follow them?" Our job is to shine a light, is to tell a story. That's what we're doing.
Right.
Like everyone has different ethical values or things that they want. But I actually do. Look, when I had that argument about it's not a good enough tool, that is a shell casing fired at an AK-47 flying through the air.
Right.
That was with an
iPhone.
iPhone 3.
Yeah.
It captured it. I am sitting on the front lines with these guys who, albeit, were using AK-47s and firing at people who are 1.5 kilometers away, which, if you know anything about guns, basically means they were hitting absolutely nothing.
Uh-huh.
Neither side was hitting anything. They were just standing there shooting at the desert.
Uh-huh.
But, in the background with the camera, and he's all the way in the background on the right, there's another photographer who's Remy Olachuk, who was killed like 3 months later in Syria with Marie Colvin in an attack, more than likely because they were using iPhones. Because you can't take out the battery and the SIM chip. You can take out the SIM chip, but you can't take out the battery, so it still pings your location. So they were able to triangulate their location based on, she had done an interview with Anderson Cooper like right before she was killed.
Huh.
And the going theory is that the Syrians were able to triangulate their location because their phones were still pinging GPS locations and the cell phone towers. Yeah. But yeah, this is the image that I would go back and forth. I would have a Canon in one hand and my iPhone in the other, so I'd shoot this image, and then this is the same guy who has the cigarette in his hand, here, and then an incoming mortar exploded right next to us, and then we fall backwards, and I'm shooting it with my iPhone.
Are you literally double fisted? Like you've got your iPhone in one hand?
A lot of practice in college.
I know.
No, I'd have my Canon, and I think I had one of those black rapid straps at one point, and I was just sling it down and bring the phone up and go back and forth between the two.
Gotcha.
When you're shooting with the iPhone, are you using a particular app? You're not using.
I was shooting with the Thematic at the time. I was really, really into Thematic.
Why would you do it that way instead of importing it?
Why would? Well, you couldn't do that back then.
Oh, okay.
You couldn't do that back then. But one of the things I liked about Thematic and its placement of the border, I couldn't crop. There was no crop. I was not able to crop these images. So there is actually something interesting about. I felt that the iPhone images where I was making and their presentation were a little bit more pure than my 35 millimeter. Because my 35 millimeter, you didn't know if I was cropping or not. You didn't know if I was changing the content of the image through cropping. But with the iPhone shots, that was it. There was nothing I can do because they included that border. And actually, referring back to our earlier conversation about cropping, I actually think that this made my images a little more ethical in a way.
And are you still shooting in Thematic today?
No.
No.
I've grown from there. Yeah.
What's your current jam in the?
I'm actually just using the iPhone, their native camera. I'm kind of past the filters and borders phase. I think that really worked. It was trendy and it sold the images and it was something interesting. But I think iPhone and mobile phone cameras have grown so much and are so ubiquitous that it's now just an image, and so I just use it as I would any other camera. I shoot a lot with Wi-Fi. I'm a Sony ambassador, so I shoot a lot with Sony's Wi-Fi enabled cameras, or I shoot with my iPhone. So and it's it just depends what I have on me, and to me now it's just about the image. It's just another tool I have in my camera bag. It doesn't make the same statement that it did 3 years ago or 4 years ago.
I absolutely love iPhone for video. I was shooting Canon stills today and iPhone video.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Oh, I've managed to sneak in some iPhone slow motion video into a commercial that I did where I was shooting with Canon C330s and a bunch of other, high-end cameras.
Which don't do slow-mo or something like that, right?
But they don't do slow-mo. It's like the slow-mo that comes out of the iPhone was actually so much more intuitive and easy to use. And we ended up having all these seagulls fly over our head in Mississippi.
That's the one on your website.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that was shot with the iPhone. And I'm like, well, I could have broken out a red and I would have to have an assistant and all this stuff. But instead, I had do you know Logan Mock Bunting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So Logan was working with me on this shoot, and he's really tall, and he would just hold... What?
Portland?
And he's based in Hawaii now.
Image deconstructed.
Yeah, image deconstructed. So he would hold these muffins from Starbucks in his hand over my head, and the seagulls would just fly low, and I'd just be shooting with the phone in slow motion, and it was perfect.
Yeah.
And the client was like, footage works. It's still good. It matches. This is a really graphic image. But this is what I was talking about. This was the image I almost lost my marriage over.
Oh, jeez.
So,
yeah.
And then instant after that, Ron Haviv was with me, and he taps me on my shoulder. He's like, "We're the last people in this building." Like, after that guy got shot, everyone ran out, and they're like, "We got to get out of Dodge." We start running down the stairs, and as we get outside, we see grenades fly over our heads.
Oh my gosh.
And as I turn around, this rebel took the brunt of the grenade, so it's exploding, which is why the frame is completely overexposed. And the bottom of the frame, that little black thing, is the front of an AK-47, and the rebel holding it just to press a button on full auto, and it fired all 30 rounds, and he slammed the front of the muzzle into my forearm as we were getting blown back by the grenade. And I had a muzzle burn of an AK-47 in my arm for about a year and a half.
Oh
It
my
just
God.
didn't go away.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
you've been through some stuff.
Been through some stuff, yeah. Actually, this image was saved by Lightroom or
Oh, really?
Aperture, one of them.
One
Yeah,
of those two,
it was
yeah.
like the blast made it like 7 stops overexposed,
Right.
and I had to bring it down. That's another good ethical question.
How dare you?
How dare
bring those
I
blacks
recover
back?
this
Yeah.
image?
Well, that's another thing with shooting.
Seven's a lot of stuff. Seven is-
7's a bit, but you know what? I mean,
Well, I mean, it was because of the I was.
try to defend
It's
yourself.
about intent. I was exposed correctly for outside, but when a bomb blast happens in front of you, there's a lot of light going on.
Which could
Does
be
that-
the title of your next book, 2 Cock, 7 Stops.
Perfect.
Huh?
Perfect. I was gonna do it like bird watching in Baghdad and other assorted tales, but nah, I like 2 Cock and 7 Stops. Yeah, I'll give you 5 cents for that. Every book sold. War fashion.
And so when did you? We're continuing to go through
Yeah.
obviously your conflict work, but then you got into doing more and more commercial work. Was that sort of?
I mean, I
was
think
that transition
I think
for you?
every photojournalist, when they mature and grow up and stop living in a closet and collect stuff, you realize, oh, I need to have a house and I have kids and I'm going to pay a mortgage and it's time to be an adult and you do other things and photojournalism doesn't. I mean, let's face it doesn't pay.
It doesn't.
It doesn't, and you have to start doing other things. So I started doing other things. My wife and I really got into video, and we started working on video productions, and we've done some TV commercials. Those pay the bills.
Yeah,
They really
absolutely. What's your passion? Like, where is your passion right now? Like, I know you said you started. You always wanted to be a war photographer.
Yeah. It's interesting. In 2005, when we got married, we just eloped and we went down to the courthouse here in New York. When I came back from covering the tsunami in Aceh, and you're supposed to write down your profession when you apply for a marriage license. And my wife wrote photojournalist. That's what she is. Yeah. And I wrote photographer.
Oh.
And I don't, to this day, know why I did that, but now I do, because. And maybe like Instagram is my best friend and my greatest enemy at the same time, but I love making images, and I don't necessarily always need to be in a war zone to do them. When I think anyone who's a photographer or interested in photography, you feel something inside you when you make an image, when you made that image. Whether it's being on the subway or, being in Scandinavia. I just went for alliteration there.
yeah,
Yeah. Sure. You made that image for the day. You made it. And you feel it in your soul because photography is all-encompassing and defines every one of us if you live your life through it. I'm happy when I make those images. I'm happy when my kids do something silly and I make a great image out of them. And I think, at the PDN Expo, they printed a ginormous picture of my son in an Iron Man costume from when we went trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
I had no intent of making this image. And instead, I made this image of my son trick-or-treating in my neighborhood, walking through a cloud of dry ice on someone's lawn.
Right.
And that ends up as being 100 feet tall, at the Javits Center.
Right.
It's but I knew when I made that image that it was really fulfilling to me, and I made an image that I felt strongly about.
Right.
So, you know,
Well,
I'll kind of get through the Warzone stuff for a little bit.
and then there's the natural disaster, and
Yeah.
I think this one was the cover of the magazine, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the
Time,
cover of Time magazine. Yeah,
that you shot on your iPhone. So was that your first iPhone cover photo?
that was my first iPhone cover. I think it's been my only iPhone cover shot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It might have been the first.
I think it was.
iPhone. That was the thing. It was like the first time any cover had an iPhone.
I remember
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And
I
remember
broke the
you-
internet.
I remember you got a lot of shit for that also, or I mean, people get they were upset about it for some reason, and
I had a great email from someone in Atlanta who was like, "I just went out and spent $8,000 on gear. How dare you? Like, how dare you photograph with your phone?"
well, I mean, it's
I didn't even know how to respond to that one.
thank you.
It's like,
What can I say?
It's the product.
I can remember the first time a cell phone photo ran on the cover of the New York Times was when I interned there like 10, 11 years ago, and there was the Spanish train bombing.
Okay.
And there was somebody with a phone.
Oh, it was
that
the
took-
London. It was the London.
Or
It was
maybe
the
it was
London one. They
London.
were coming out of the tube.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was an intern, and I got to go on the A1 meeting with Michelle McNally. And, they had this amazing photo, and it's this big thing, like, what do we do? Will it hold up? Yeah, it'll hold up. I mean, you're printing on toilet paper. for
Right.
goodness sake.
Look, I've made 60 by 60 prints out of iPhone pictures.
Really?
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
And are you, at this point, did you upgrade to the largest one?
Well, I mean, at this point, like, I actually, yeah, I do. I've tested some equipment for Apple in the past, and, like, every time a new phone comes out, I get it and I play
with it.
Yeah. So yeah, now I have like the 6S Plus, and it's
what I
actually
use,
bigger than
yeah.
the camera that I took to Iraq in 2003.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's
Yeah.
huge. I mean, these things are
I
big.
think there's strengths and weaknesses to shooting with the iPhone, which I think if you know what they are, you can use it to your advantage.
Right.
Like, it has no depth of field,
Yeah.
but everything's in focus. Like,
Right.
there's no sense of 3 dimensions, and I think that actually works when if you want to just like compress and layer, you all of a sudden you have like a 28 millimeter lens that acts like you're shooting with a 200. So it compresses all that space except on a wide angle. And if you want to use it, if you know that it can do that, it's like an amazing tool. Like I was recently in India and I was doing street photography, and I was like, for some of my shots, I actually used my iPhone versus using the rangefinder that I had, because they acted in different ways and able to record space.
Right.
So
Cool.
There is a video, by the way, of Martin Parr shooting with a Nintendo game.
Oh, yeah, right.
Walking around a park shooting people, and he's got a Nintendo game.
That's got to be
Has a
digital
camera,
rev.
Right.
and he's shooting.
Yeah.
And like everyone's trying to. I think one of the things, if you're trying to be innovative, is these days, from the technology side, it's about adapting and using all these new technologies. How can they help us tell stories? At the end of the day, it's about telling stories and creating images that people want to look at, that you want people to look at. But sometimes using technology and being innovative can help in that process, can help on the pathway to connecting with people. And that's kind of my understanding. That's how I want to do it. Do I keep on using the iPhone? Like I said, I can shoot with my Sonys now and just have the pictures transmit straight to my phone, so I can have like complete control and do it that way. Does that help? Does that hinder? I don't know. Is that being innovative? Is using all the different types of social media all at once? Does that work? Does playing with video and mixing with stills? There's so many different things out there that can help us communicate, and I think that's where innovation and moving ahead in the business is really key.
Yeah, like if I'm just cruising on Instagram or Tumblr, I am never asking myself, as I see pictures of
Right. At this point, it doesn't matter.
I'm not saying what kind of camera did this guy use. I'm asking myself one question: is do I feel like looking at this picture?
Right.
Or do I feel like
Right.
continuing to scroll?
I think the one thing that maybe having the phone gives us is it's more convenient to edit images. Like if you were shooting with your traditional camera, you go back and you open Photoshop. Photoshop is a beast. There's so many options. You know, you have to be really adept at using it, and the interface is very much straightforward. If someone who works in graphic design, that hasn't changed. But the interfaces that have been created for using mobile, you know, camera phone technology are much more intuitive, and you have the ability on much quicker ability, I would think, to edit your pictures or change them in a very different way. You can still do it on Photoshop. It's just easier to do on your phone. And I think that's where the thing is like people now are taking pictures and are just going crazy. They're making them black and white. They're going super contrast. So you can put a blur on, put a fake tilt shift. You can do all kinds of things to them. And so does that help? Does that hinder? That's the question we're going to ask ourselves. Or, you know, is social media going to up and die in 10 years because we're just so sick of it? And
there's going to be a next thing. There's going to be something else. I don't know what.
Yeah.
But so one of the things, this is turning into like a motion picture, this podcast. We're getting pretty long here.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know that we were going to talk about is, and obviously we're going to still go through some photos, but is life.
Just keep on pressing back.
Yeah, just keep on pressing. He also shoots sports, which is the Olympics here. Life after, like you said, after photojournalism.
Well, for me, life after photojournalism is saying what else is out there, and so I started with sports. I think sports photography is very closely related to war photography. You just have to be at the right place, that height and moment. Yeah.
And who was your client when you shot this?
I was shooting everything for Harper's magazine.
Really?
Like Stacey Clarkson was amazing, and she was like, "We have this credential for the Winter Olympics, and you can cover every single sport." So I was like, "Okay," and David Burnett emailed me and he said, "Listen, the most important thing you have to do is bring shower curtains, because none of the showers had curtains, and like power bars and protein bars."
Oh yeah.
And I got to Sochi, and it was like crazy roughing it. I think someone from Willow or The Hobbit installed my bathroom sink in my bathroom, because I had to do this deep squat in order to shave. It was made for like a 4-foot tall man.
Well, and it's Japan, right? So.
Well, no, Sochi is it's in Russia.
Oh, Russia. Yeah. Sorry.
And
it's the Sochi, Russia. Yeah.
I blew out all the transformers, the surges on my floor in this hotel. You could only plug in one thing at a time. They wouldn't let me put in a power strip. So I remember charging at every battery, and then setting my alarm on my phone and waking up an hour later and charging another battery and going to sleep for an hour. And
when you covered the Olympics, you weren't covering it like someone would for the New York Times or something, where you're having to cover this person. It's just free reign.
It's free. I mean, to me, that's where I shine. Like, I learned a long time ago, I'm not a great newspaper photographer. I'm a great roving photographer who can make images that connect ephemerally later on. Like, that's where my strengths are. It's like I let each story talk to me as I go through it. Like, I didn't know that I was going to shoot this in black and white. It just ended up like that. I ended up doing cage fighting for 7 years of photographing cage fighting in America, and just brutal amateur stuff, like away from the lights, away from the UFC. And then I started this giant project of which the cage fighting of sports led to it, where I'm now going around the world photographing traditional wrestling techniques from all over the world. Like, the original sport was wrestling, and sports in general was mankind's first attempt at conflict resolution. It was like two shepherds who were like arguing over a cow and be like, "It's mine. No, it's mine. Okay, I'll wrestle for it." And that was it. And that's how it started. And I think it's translated to the modern day with, like, we're all from New York and we hate Boston, but we don't go up to Boston and throw down, right? We do it on the field.
Right. Sure.
And so sports has become like this way for the quote unquote civilized world to get out its grievances. And I was, after years of covering war, I was like, well, that's an interesting way to take it. So I got the Olympic Committee asked me to photograph the Wrestling World Championships. And I had full access, more than any. I was like the annoying guy most photographers hate, where I could go past everyone at the World Championships, and I shot with like 4 cameras. My knees were swollen. I had like 2 cameras shooting video. I had 2 other cameras shooting stills. I'd be running around the mats for like 7 days, and it started leading to things, because that started bleeding into the commercial world. This is like wrestling in India. It's like I couldn't. I remember standing here and I was like, how do I even make this image? I was just like overwhelmed by a bunch of dudes in loincloths.
Sandy dudes.
Sandy.
Yeah.
I actually wrestled, and I'm wearing a loincloth when I made this image.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but once you see that picture, you can't
never
unsee
see
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't manscape the night before.
Oh, well, that's
and
good to
me in
know.
a loincloth is just without
Let's
a little. Yeah, it's bad news. It's bad news.
maybe you'll have to send us that later so that we can pop in.
So because of that wrestling stuff, my wife and I, through the strength of that, we ended up getting an interview for a TV commercial, and one thing led to another, and we did this giant 5-month kind of extravaganza of a TV commercial and a still commercial, going through the editing process and shooting, and that really paid the bills more than any photojournalism ever would. And then, all these like photo editors have been fired for one magazine or fired from another and end up in different places. And these are all people that I know, and they know I have kids, and they started giving me different interesting jobs. So this was, basically a climbing, trekking assignment in Iceland. Where I'm like, oh, I can start, doing something completely different, completely foreign to what I was doing. This is like right on the tip, right before in Chile, right before you get to Antarctica. This is like an island of aging penguins whose children have left them to die.
Oh, that's sad. So this was for this was a commercial job?
No, these were editorial assignments.
Okay.
This is I was like, someone asked me to go to Chile and photograph the puma, which is not an endangered species. It's actually the most successful, big cat in the world. It stretches from North America all the way down to Antarctica.
Uh-huh.
Like, puma, mountain lions, cougars, it's the same animal. And, there's in one part in this park in Chile where they're completely unhabituated to the human presence. They don't know about people. And I was like thinking in my head, like all of a sudden they see like this giant metal animal vomit out human beings. I was just like trying to imagine how they think about us in cars and stuff. But like,
yeah.
they don't deal with humans. They're not afraid of humans down there yet.
Uh-huh.
They will be, but they're not yet. And I started trekking. We would go on these like 4-hour treks through the wilderness, with a 600 lens and the 200 to 400, and I had like someone carrying gear for me, and we'd be climbing, and all of a sudden, like, to me, that's like being back in Iraq or Afghanistan, just the physicality of it, and like this adrenaline rush of being like in this den of this female, very hungry, puma,
Mm-hmm.
and just being like, I have to make this image. And it was really intense because I think one of the big differences between wildlife photography and anything else is that the animals absolutely do not give a shit about you. Like, in the past, I'd be anyone in the world, like, look, I want to take your picture. I mean, it'll help. I'm going to try and help you. I don't know if it's going to help, but I want to make this photo. I'm here, and you negotiate, and you make eye contact with people, and you get permission, and you don't, or people in the street chase you. I don't know. An animal is just like, they don't even know what you're doing. They don't care. They're either going to eat you or they're not, or they're
Right.
going to completely ignore you. And all of a sudden, all those conversations that I was used to having, all those times where I was trying to learn in like 30 different languages, can I take your picture? It's like, doesn't even matter.
Right.
It doesn't even matter. And all of a sudden, it's just like, it's completely about your body language and how you are. And if you look at that animal in the eyes and you blink. And it was an amazing experience. It was absolutely amazing.
I mean, it's amazing that you've gone through so many, the diversity.
I think she wanted to eat me here, though.
I'm sure he wanted to eat you. It's amazing the diversity of the work that you've shown here, and I'm sure that this doesn't. I know that it doesn't even cover a.
That's it. Those are all the pictures I've ever taken.
This
in my
is
career.
it
Yeah,
right
I
here.
don't do anything
But
else.
I mean, you have a ton of great projects. You've covered the politics.
I have covered politics. Yeah.
What was it you covered?
I did a lot of Republican and Democratic conventions, and one of the things that I did was I would take portraits of people looking like they were praying at the conventions, and I often went for the cliche. I would like find the one black Republican and the one crazy preppy white Democrat, and I would take their portraits and I'd be like, which one is which? You decide. And I kind of had this idea of like just photographing people and being like, they're all American.
Oh,
it was very idealistic and nice, and I think I might approach it a little differently if I get an assignment this year. But yeah, no, I've done fashion. I did fashion right after coming back from Iraq, and I remember being so annoyed. I was at this designer's show, and she was going crazy because one of the models wasn't there yet or wasn't dressed. And I was like, I literally had just gotten off the plane from Iraq. I had just survived another suicide bombing, and I was so annoyed. I was like, do you even know what the fuck is going on in the world?
Yeah.
And I was like, I am going to make fun of everyone here. And I ended up strapping my strobes to my feet. And they would just be on my Keds, on my Vans or whatever I was wearing. And I would just like kick up my feet and I would underlight everyone. So they have these crazy arched eyebrows and like the lip shadow all over their nose. And I was like, I just want to make fun of this. And for the first week, I was just really angry about how it could exist. And then, you know, I have a really good friend, Mark Leibowitz, who's a fashion photographer. And he sat me down. He knew I was angry. And we talked about how this also has its own place in the world, and you know, and how this gives jobs. I mean, it was kind of like a cyclical conversation about, you know, there's fashion, there's culture, there are other things except misery, and it relates to being a father too, because you know there are other things than just covering war, and there are other amazing things out there, and you know, sometimes sunsets are really beautiful, and you do want to photograph them for no other reason than they're there.
Yeah,
you know,
totally. And then now let's move. Oh, got a question. Sorry.
You ever shoot film?
Do you ever shoot film anymore?
Like celluloid film, or I mean like film like video film?
Celluloid.
No, because every time I break out a film camera, I'm like, why the fuck am I doing this? I'm gonna have to process it. I'm gonna take it to a lab. I could just shoot it with my phone, and it'll look like I shot it on Tri-X.
You walked through Afghanistan, you know. How much hard
Yeah, no.
rolls to the lab versus.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have lots of rolls of film that haven't been processed. I still have my Holgas. I have the very first.
Do you have a connect? Like I'm a photographer for 40 years. I shoot both, but I have this weird connection where film cameras and everything bring me back to the beginning.
You know, I still have my very first camera. It was a Nikon F3. I bought it on the street in Jerusalem when I was heading to Ramallah with a British photographer, Mark Seeger, who kind of took me under his wing because I didn't know what I was doing when I first got there, and I had this dinky little Pentax that my dad bought me from B&H like in the year 2000, and so I bought this F3, and he like turned the dial to all manual and taped it with gaffer tape and said stick there, and that's how I learned. I still have it, but I don't shoot with it. I still have a brick of Kodak G. Which I'm sure the color has just slid to some crazy emulsion awesomeness. But you know, if I do my storylines of like the Holga work, I'll get back into the film stuff. But for the most part, for what I do, no, you know, I for me it's the end product. It's the image that I make. It's not what I'm using to make the image. Right now I'm using Sony cameras, and I like them a lot because they're sort of convenient. They fit good in my hand, and they made me an artisan, which is a good excuse.
What did you use in Afghanistan?
In Afghanistan, I did a very big project with the Mamiya 6 for about a year, which was all portraits. And then I was shooting Canon. I was shooting Canon for years. I started on Nikon, and then with the Battle of Fallujah, my Nikon D2X would just shoot. You'd press the button and it would fire 13 half frames, and like I would have half of the chip exposed and half not, and I was just like, this camera's not working for me anymore. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was shooting with Canon, and she introduced me to Canon. I did Canon for years, and then I just was, looking for something smaller, and I started with Fuji and did some Olympus stuff, and every one of these cameras offers something different, and it's a different experience, But right now, like I use, there's one Sony camera that gives me a viewfinder that pops up that lets me shoot like I used to shoot with my Nikon F3, which is like looking straight down. And as a tall man, I found that most of my images, always through the course of my career, I'm looking down at people. And now, just the act of holding a camera here and using that viewfinder, I'm kind of lowering myself in height-wise with my images, and I find that that's made a big difference to how I'm seeing the world.
New
And so,
perspective.
yeah, and I really like that right now.
Cool.
You got a great eye, so you could use a pinhole and you still get great stuff.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
Aw.
that. Yeah, I'm going to get into drawing now. I'm just going to draw a picture.
Don't get your hopes up. So let's move into some of your more recent work. I noticed that you had this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, this is... I can get through it really quick. I'll just show this one, but this is a recent underwater shot from with sharks.
Clearly.
Yeah. And yeah, that it's a whole new ball game, and I'm super into it. I've been it was just kind of fell in my lap, and it's something I've been running with for like the last couple of months of starting to get more and more into underwater and more trekking, and like between these these images and this, it's like it's a whole new world for me.
Yeah.
To do something different, like.
And
So
Your life insurance policy.
yeah, well,
they don't cover all that.
life insurance, right? Well, I really appreciate you, going through so much of your work throughout the years. Obviously, things have changed from, conflict to now wildlife to, everything, politics. But do you have any thoughts? Like, we go back, now it's 90 minutes back we go, right?
Yeah.
Do we have any? Do you have any like thoughts for photographers in the that are getting up in the field now? Like, what would you do differently?
I mean, I think from a business point of view, like is getting your business squared away, because so many people.
Do you wish that you might have gotten into commercial work prior to when you did? Actually, do you feel you did?
I am not a big fan of having regrets or anything, if only because everything that I've done before this moment has led me to this moment.
Right.
So if I said I did commercial work first, maybe I wouldn't be this type of photographer. Maybe I'd be something else. Maybe I would have given up
be sitting
photography.
here across
and-
from each other
yeah,
talking.
I'd have become an accountant.
Oh.
So I now that I am doing commercial work and some TV commercials, and I understand how much money they pay, and I can have this mortgage or buy a car and actually park it next door and not go broke, which is insane, the parking next door.
Yeah.
And they don't endorse here. Should work
Oh,
on
you
that.
mean
Yeah.
right.
But it's I mean, there's living life comfortably and having a big house, and if you want that, and you realize, I need some of these jobs. I need to do TV commercials because that pays fantastically well compared to the dismal amount we get as a photojournalist. But there's a reason I became a photographer, and I think I want my kids to be happy. I want to buy them as many action figures as I can. But I don't want to sell my own soul totally. And like, I like doing commercial work. I like doing TV commercials. But I am a photographer who goes out there and experiences the world because not too many other people want to or are willing to. And that's why I do it. It's for no other reason than that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Before we go, I just want to make sure that everyone can check out your site. It's benlowy.com.
Yep.
Ben Lowy on Instagram, all your social media.
Ben Lowy.
Ben Lowy.
Ben Lowy, which is an anagram for web only. If you spell my...
Isn't that something? And then also, thank you again to Adorama. If you like this content, what you just watched, and you want to see more of it, you can come see us in person. Check us out at photobrigade.com/live. Please subscribe to our YouTube page. Thanks again to Canon Professional Services in Tenba, and of course, to Ben Lowy.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
buddy.
much. All right.
All right. We'll see you again next time, everyone.